But now, did your breakfast look something like this? Well, it may surprise you. Let's take a look. That everything here... No, that can't be... Let's just show them the right things. Hang on. A lot of stuff here is ultra-processed. Now, Dr. Chris Van Tulleken will do that better than I just did. I cocked that up slightly. We've been looking into the impact of the types of foods, these types of foods on your body in this fantastic book, which I have been absolutely glued to, Chris. But it's slightly terrifying. I went for a big food shop yesterday and I went through with my trolley and I was like, oh, my God, I don't know. I ended up buying German rye bread, which I've never bought in my life, because I thought that's the only thing I'm allowed to eat. Here it is. Yes. Tell me a bit about the premise of your fantastic book, which is now out in paperback.
So it's about ultra-processed food, which I think most people by now have heard of.
Right, yeah.
If you're wondering what ultra-processed food is, it's food that has at least one ingredient that you wouldn't typically find in a domestic kitchen. So these chocolate-covered rice puffs will have an emulsifier, glucose syrup, flavourings. This bread will have stuff in it called mono and diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides of fatty acids.
I'm glad you said that.
Most common emulsifier in bread. The yoghurt will have flavourings and modified starches. These cereals will have other emulsifiers, stabilisers. So these... we might just reorganise this food, actually, into the ultra-processed stuff and the non-ultra-processed sort of versions, because for every ultra-processed food, for every real food, almost always there is an ultra-processed.
So just talk us through then, because this is probably the dilemma, if we choose to accept it, that all of us have in our lives, especially as parents, you know, and you're trying to feed yourself and your kids well and hand on good habits. But we only know what we know, and I think that that's what you're expanding our understanding of what we think food is.
So, in fact, in my book, there is no advice. There's no advice, because to give people advice, they have to have the capacity to follow it. And I don't know people's budgets, I don't know their families, I don't know their food cultures. And the truth is that for many people in the UK, ultra-processed food is the only affordable and available food.
And you say in your book, don't you, for example, that you could get an ultra-processed £1 pizza from the frozen section of your local shop, but the sort of unprocessed version of a pizza would cost £14 or something.
Well, if you go to a fancy pizza restaurant and get a sourdough pizza covered in organic mozzarella, it'll cost you a lot more money. You know, this bread you can buy for, you know, less than £1 a loaf. If you go and buy a loaf of bread from a bakery, it might be £5 or £6.
Exactly. So most people are priced out of eating well, in some ways.
We know this is true. So the book, I'm treading a knife edge. My suggestion to you in the book is to join in an experiment.
You did it to yourself.
I did it to myself.
Tell us about what you did for the book.
So I ate a diet of 80% ultra-processed food. Now, I didn't...
That side of stuff.
This stuff here. And I didn't do it casually. I did it as part of an experiment that I do with my academic colleagues at UCL, where I work. And we saw lots of effects. I gained a huge amount of weight. We saw changes on my brain scan. And we saw alterations in the fullness hormones that you release after meals. So this is food that interferes with our ability to feel full.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is I became disgusted with the food. And so that's the gift I'm trying to give the reader. Without shaming anyone or stigmatising anyone, I'm trying to make you understand that it's worth considering whether or not this stuff is really food.
And you know what I found? There are two things that really struck me, and I haven't finished your book because I've literally been poring over it, but I haven't quite finished it. But two things struck me. Firstly, at the outset, you say that, and it's quite, I suppose, divisive in some ways because of the culture of the way we look at obesity or overweight. Actually, because we say, I am overweight, rather than I have overweight. And you say, actually, you wouldn't say, I am cancer, or I am a kidney disease. You say, I have it. Yeah. But you say that we have gone so far in thinking that overweightness is your full identity, that we have to break that.
So we always...
Because there's blame involved, there's shame involved.
So I say people... and I think doctors really need to work at this change. People live with obesity. It's up to them. If they want it as an identity, that can be people's choice. But it's a disease people live with. We know that it is not caused by a lack of willpower. We have absolute certainty about that. It's not caused by inactivity either. The reason that 25% of children leave primary school living with obesity is the food environment in this country. So rather than telling people what to eat, what we need to do is change the food system.
Can I just ask you, because there's so much to talk to you about, and I'm sure we'll have you on many times, but the traffic light system, which is, you're not a fan of it, but there's an alternative that you think is better. Just explain that if you can.
If you go and buy a can of sugary cola, OK, there are 4 traffic lights on it. 3 of them are green and the red one's invisible because the can is red, OK? So the traffic light system, it uses the wrong thresholds for salt, fat and sugar, and we know it doesn't really shift purchasing. What we need is the warning labels that they're using now very widely in other countries, in South and Central America, big black octagon stop signs. And we can do that for our recommendations for fat, salt and sugar, because it turns out that one of the big problems with ultra-processed food is it's very high in fat, salt and sugar.
Yeah, sorry, I was twisting because I was trying to read what it said on there, read what it said on there. And the thing that, that your book makes the argument of so far in what I've read is that it's not that the UPF foods have more or less fibre or more or less sugar, and often that is true. But even if you match it in terms of nutrient content with a non-UPF diet and a UPF diet, actually the detrimental effects of the UPF are so great and so vast.
This is like talking to a food scientist who's been studying this for years.
I have been reading it. But the thing is, so that's why, because there's something in the molecular structure of what happens to the food that changes our body.
Exactly. So look at these two breads, OK?
Yes.
If you take that slice and I take this slice and we have a race, it will take me about twice as long to eat that slice of bread. Ultra-processed food is incredibly soft. And it's very, very, very energy dense because it's dry, because that extends shelf life. And so it delivers calories into our body at a rate that we can't keep up with. And this is the most well-studied effect of ultra-processed food is weight gain, because we consume calories so rapidly. You eat an apple, there's sugar and calories in here, but they're diluted with water and it takes you a while to chew.
And we've run out of time, but I just want to say quickly that you also talk about the fact that when something claims it's healthy or low fat or this, that and the other, it's usually ultra-processed, which you just don't make that connection
Bananas
naturally.
never have a health claim on them. Apples never do. Broccoli...
No, they don't need to shout about it.
They don't need to shout about it.
There is so much to talk about. It has blown my mind so far.
It means a huge
and slightly
amount.
terrified me on my weekly shop.
Well.
But that's what you wanted. So, Chris, thank you so much. Dr. Chris's book, I honestly can't recommend it highly enough. It's called Ultra-Processed People, and it is out now. Loads of people came into the studio. In fact, Prue Leith, are you talking to Chris? I love that book. You know, everybody who's read it is changed by it.
I'm a huge fan of Prue.